What is going on, YouTube? What is going on, Kansas City? And what is going on, everybody? And welcome to the Beat of KC. We have an amazing guest on today, Josh Keiser, host of Clearing Waivers podcast. Well, one of the hosts, and he's also a contributor for Royals Review. Man, I can't thank you for enough, honestly, for coming on and giving me the opportunity to interview you, ask you some questions about baseball. It's an absolute privilege. How you doing, man?
Lucas, I'm doing great, man. And how can you not with that energy you just brought, man? I am hyped now. I
Let's
was a little
go.
bit flat. I was a little bit flat there, but that energy you're bringing is infectious, my
I
man.
got to get I'm telling you, I got to get the guest fired up, and
Yeah.
that's what makes these things exciting. So
Yep.
for
I
sure.
dig it. I dig it. But other than that, I'm doing great. I appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, no problem, man. Well, that the first thing I do want to talk about is Clearing Waivers podcast. How did you guys come together? What made you guys want to start doing the podcast, and specifically why baseball?
Uh, in a nutshell, we basically wanted to do a podcast that covered local sports. It kind of just evolved and kind of became mostly Chiefs and Royals, even though we do kind of talk Mizzou, college basketball, college football quite a bit. There last year, we got pretty creative with, I think we even had one episode was like 30 minutes of golf talk. Like we have some golfers on the podcast, but there was no sports happening. They had the match with Mickelson and Woods and Brady and Manning. We talked for probably 30 minutes about it. And it was just a podcast. We wanted to kind of get together and cover local sports in an entertaining way. That was kind of the elevator pitch we ran out. So we wanted to combine that the existing coverage where, the hosts talk at you. We're going to talk at you quite a bit. But it's also just normal barroom banter that you're going to have with buddies. We want it to be structured, but informal and casual at the same time. We
Sure.
cover, the best smells along this is cutter, stuff like that. So that's kind of how we started it. We've seen the Chiefs raise a flag off of it. The first year we got in there, it was it was probably all to do with the fact that we started this podcast is
It had to be.
why the Chiefs raised that flag. But in essence, that's basically what we wanted to do is just cover something in an entertaining way that people would enjoy. That's basically it.
That's awesome. That's kind of an inspiration in itself. You see friends, buddies come together and they want to talk sports. And honestly, that's kind of the same passion I have, and really the drive that I want for my YouTube channel is to be able
Absolutely.
to talk sports with friends and have guests on like yourself. And that's what's absolutely cool. And I do have to say, I started this right about a month ago, and the
Yep.
community honestly has been just tremendous to even like reach out to you guys and just, hey, do you want to come on and talk? Like, nobody knows who I am or really knows what I'm about, but you guys give me the opportunity, and it's a blast. So I thank you, and for giving me this opportunity and telling us a little bit about the podcast for sure. So that leads me into a big reason why I had you on. You guys do talk Royals, and the Royals are obviously on TV right now. They're playing. The first thing, I do want to touch on, we did call up Jackson Kowar the other day. I know I was super hyped. I know you guys were hyped up. I watched your latest episode, and it just didn't go as planned. We'll talk about Jackson himself, but as of late, it seems like when we call up our minor league pitching, I get that it's the big stage. I get it's the major leagues, and I get there's a lot of pressure going into it. Do you feel that they set Jackson up for success by, one, putting his debut on the road, putting him on the West Coast, and then putting him against the Angels? Or would you have liked to see him maybe get called up, maybe throw a pin to Salvi, and maybe start against like a Tigers or a Twins, and at least been given the opportunity to pitch at home? Do you have any thoughts on that?
It's kind of hard to say because they're major leaguers, and the fact that they get the call, and that was like a promotion that wasn't really caused by an injury. So it's
Yeah.
basically the Royals saying, we know you're ready. And he looked really good in Omaha. So it makes a lot of sense why the Royals would believe that. And if you're going to get that call, then you got to be ready to be dialed in whenever, whoever the opponent is, wherever the game is being played. So I can understand why the question's being asked there and quite raised, But if you can't throw strikes, it's not going to matter if it's the Tigers. It's not going to matter if it's the Yankees. If you can't throw strikes, it doesn't matter where you're pitching or who you're pitching to. It's not going to go well. And it seemed like the nerves definitely seemed to get the best of him that night. Kowar is kind of known for having pretty good command.
Yeah.
And clearly Salvi, platinum glove level defense behind the plate there. Maybe that we mentioned it on the podcast this week. Maybe those days are behind him. He's not the best, but the balls kept getting away from him like nobody's business. So that kind of told me that that's even more so that Kowar was struggling with command that much. I also really hope that is as bad as it's going to get, and it's only going to go up from here, and it's going to take off from there, and he's going to turn into the pitcher that we've all kind of expected him to be.
For sure. You could tell. I mean, he was going to turn that gum almost into powder. I mean, that guy was chomping at the bit. And I'm obviously never pitched in a major league game or really even understand that pressure of the magnitude. But
you're talking to me, and that's pretty pressure filled right there.
But I mean, I do. I understand. I completely understand, the nervousness. I mean, that's not necessarily a big game, but that's one of the biggest opportunities you're going to face in your career. So I completely get that. And I do feel that we will see hopefully that behind him. And I do think it helps too that, Brady Singer's there. I mean, that's his good buddy. They're best friends. They went through the battles together at Florida. So, I mean, Brady has been I would say he's been struggling a little bit as of late too, it seems like. And, maybe those two being together, they can start getting back into their routine and pounding it back out. So, I'm super excited for that. And I do. That kind of leads me to talking a little bit more about the starting pitching. What are your thoughts right now about our starting pitching? Do you think it's fair enough to, because my thoughts are I was hoping, it doesn't look like it, but I was hoping if we could go 500 in this series and get to July, because July's schedule seems to be a little bit less, I guess, harsh. I think we had a chance to potentially have a wild card spot going into the All-Star break, leading into, going into July. Do you think our starting pitching has been manageable enough to even get us to a wild card?
As a whole on the entire year, I came into the season expecting them to be somewhere in the middle, being average at least. And they've been underachieving that. They can't even get to average at this point. Season ERA for starting pitchers for the Royals right now is 4.97. I ain't going to do it. Not going to do it. I will say that during that hot streak that followed the 11-game losing streak, they were around 4.13. So that was a little bit closer to the middle. And at that point, they rattled off, 13 and 5 or something after that 11-game winning streak. So the bullpen was also very good in that run. And it still seems to be, pretty solid. As long as they don't get burnt out here, there's no reason why they shouldn't be able to keep that momentum going. So we've seen them have success when the rotation is just average and the bullpen is lights out. Offense can be average during that run, and they can still find success in the right pocket of a schedule. Like you said, that schedule is not necessarily a gauntlet of any means leading up to even the trade deadline. I think is still pretty soft up until that point. And then that month after that trade deadline is bonkers. It is brutal, and a whole month of it. So I wondered, I don't expect them to do much in the trade deadline period, but I definitely don't want them to become buyers, start selling away pieces that are, potentially not the right time to leverage that type of, value.
For sure.
Just to run into the Yankees and the Astros and just start getting just pummeled with these really, really good teams. So I'm a little bit worried about that. But like you said, with that soft schedule, it's time to really evaluate where this team is over the next 6 to 7 weeks to that point. And the rotation is definitely a very big part of that. If they can even be average, I feel like they're going to very much run through this schedule a little bit easier. But if they can't get through the fourth inning with their starting pitcher, then it's going to be a long damn season.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. And that's where I'll go ahead, since we kind of brought it up a little bit with the trade deadline, because I was going to lead to the hitters. I think we're going to start to see the point where if we are struggling going into that, and we'll say halfway through July, and it's just not working out, I think the Royals do become sellers. If that's the case, who do you see or envision immediately up on the chopping block? Is there anybody that you think is going to wow people that are like, man, I hope this doesn't happen? Or is there anybody that,
I mean, the big one, we've talked about it for the last 3 seasons. Whit Merrifield is the big
yeah,
one. But this is the least amount of value he has probably put up at this point of any season of those three.
yeah,
So it would be a very big surprise, that the organization actually pulled the trigger on a Whit Merrifield trade is in and of itself unfathomable at this point.
yeah, yeah,
They had every reason to over the last 3 seasons where they're losing 100 games, or at least on a pace for 100 games. And he was controllable. He was producing big time. It
yeah,
was, it was at his peak. And it was any of those times they could have pulled the cord and traded him away for something of value in the future. The fact that they didn't do it, and now his value is lower than it was. He has one less season of control. His numbers aren't what they usually had been. So it would be absolutely baffling for them to actually make that trade. I don't think they will, for that matter. And really, who is there to sell off? I mean, even in those rental contracts, Greg Holland, maybe.
yeah,
I don't know what he's pulling back outside of cash considerations. Solaire's not doing much, but he would have been a great, and he could still be. I mean, we still got 6 weeks before that is even, needed, and he could get red hot and start producing something. But even then, what are you pulling back from a trade from that point? So I don't expect them to do much. And if they are buyers at that point, maybe they had a bullpen arm, but I think they're going to pull from within a
yeah,
little bit more. Call up potentially a Bobby Witt Jr. Call up give Oliveras a lot more reps and see what he's made of. See what some of these guys, Kyle Isbell, I'm big proponent of that dude.
yeah,
And they can obviously pull up any of these young horse arms that they're just flooded with all of a sudden over the last few drafts here.
for
But
sure.
they could 100% pull within, promote, and give some reps in that situation if they decide that, now's the time to start buying and see what they've got. So to answer your question, I really would be shocked if it was a Whit Merrifield trade for so many reasons. I don't think it's going to happen. And I think at the biggest move that will come is maybe a Greg Holland trade.
For sure. That's awesome. Yeah. I've always been a big Carlos Santana fan. I
Yeah.
really have, even when for the longest time he was with the Indians. I would hate to, as crazy as it sounds, I know he's getting up there, but I would hate to see him go. I think he just provides such good leadership. He is a switch hitter. He does get on base through walks, and he's got 10 home runs. I mean, he's doing what his part at least. So
He's still only hitting like 246 or something, but his on base is like upper 300s.
Yeah.
And by the way, they bring Carlos Santana in, they bring Andrew Benintendi in, these guys that are plate approach guys.
Yeah.
It is awesome to kind of see the guys come from outside of the organization, and just it's a night and day difference from anybody who came up in the Royal system or has been with the Royals for multiple seasons. It's just night and day the approach that they get to step into the box with. It's just fun to see. I'm glad we got the opportunity to kind of compare those two.
Yeah, for sure. And that's definitely a noticeable thing. I mean, it's also a noticeable thing, I feel like, when it comes to just minor leaguers in general. Like, it's crazy to see the development of a minor leaguer who gets the opportunity to play, like a Kyle Isbell, who really, I feel, had a great opportunity. I think there's times where we saw the youth and really saw the inexperience, but for him to come up, and I feel like, him to do what he did, I thought that earned him a spot on this team. And I get why he was sent down. Don't get me wrong, but
Sure.
to keep plugging Jorge Soler out in right field for as much as we did, Kyle Isbell deserved that spot more than anybody, I felt. And then, and then you got, Ryan O'Hearn, who keeps getting called back up, who is killing it right now by the way, down in AAA, hitting 2 home runs, just launching the ball. But when he gets up here, he literally can't hit water if he fell out of a boat. And so it's just kind of crazy.
I saw Craig Brown tweeted something today on O'Hearn. He said that he might have created a new category of 5A player. You got the AAA, you got the quadruple A, and now you got the 5A player. Now that there's a pretty noticeable gap between the minors and the majors, it's wild. It's absolutely wild, and it's kind of fool's gold at that point. We all think we know what we've seen from Ryan O'Hearn. So to be able to be like, why is he going to Omaha, hitting 8 home runs in 10 games, come to Kansas City, hit 186, strike out 35% of the time, and hit no dingers? And then the one time, inevitably, every time it happens, I say Ryan O'Hearn is done. Jack. He hits the jack immediately. It does not fail. It's amazing.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's absolutely amazing. And I could never figure it out because wasn't Ryan O'Hearn like the Royals minor league player of the year one time?
That sounds familiar. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure he was minor league player of the year at one point. We're like, get this guy up here. He gets up here and you're like, is that the same guy?
Yep.
Yeah. So
him and who was the other? Frank Schwindel. He was the man, the myth, the legend, Frank Schwindel, and they kind of hit their stride at the same time. So you're like, maybe between the two of them, you could platoon them, and they turn into an awesome first baseman.
Yeah,
not so much.
Frank the Tank was just hitting nukes down there in spring training, and then he comes up. Yeah, you could throw him, McBroom, and O'Hearn all in the same boat, and send them 100%. Off. Like, let them go. But yeah, man, that's awesome. So yeah, that kind of, we'll go into kind of some of the pitching stuff with the bullpen. So we are seeing Bolaños come up. Man, that guy looked phenomenal. You know, I've been tracking Ronald Bolaños for a while. I play a pretty significant fantasy baseball where we have to draft minor leaguers and stuff, and so I've been following Bolaños for a while. He throws some flames. I was excited to see him up there. He looked like he was out there just having fun, all loose and just letting it fly. So I like to see that. Carlos Hernandez looks like he got called up again. I didn't see if they're going to start him or if they're going to let him go out of the pen.
It would surprise me if he did start some games, because they do have the 5-man rotation, but this stretch, they're in a brutal stretch where it's like 2 more off days until the All-Star break. So he could 100% get a spot start in there at some point, but I could mostly see most of his roles being, you know, low leverage mop up roles, and then seeing what happens with that.
Well, and we know our pitching hasn't gone past 5 in a while, so maybe he'll be out there
a hot minute,
shoving some innings. So
and I'd be fine with that. I'm a big fan of Bolaños too. I want to see him eat, and he's hitting 97, 98 a little bit, so I could get into that. Carlos Hernandez, same dude. I love Carlos Hernandez as well, but both of those dudes are still pretty young, and they got a little bit to prove as well.
Yeah, for sure, and that's what's exciting. I think you're starting to see some of these guys come up in that aspect and just go out there and tout what they got and let it just flames come out. And that's pretty cool. Cause you know, that pairs well, that does take us back when we had, you know, you had Hochevar, not necessarily throwing that hard, but Hochevar, then you had Herrera, you had Holland, and you had Davis. I mean, those guys, they did throw hard and they all had their unique ability. And I think you're kind of seeing that develop. I mean, you got Zimmer coming out. That's been pretty solid. Stalmont's obviously throwing 100, 101 has been pretty solid. You know, Scott Barlow's been special, I think. I mean, for everything you asked that guy to do, hey, we need you 2 innings tonight, but we need you to save the game tomorrow. You know, I really like Barlow. And then Jake Brentz, holy smokes. Getting Brentz from the Pirates and him just being that lefty specialist. I feel he's a good specialist, but, you know, he gets everyone out. So,
you
like you like the development, how we have the pin.
Oh, 100%. Those 3 dudes that you were talking about outside of Stalmont, between Barlow, Brentz, and Zimmer, are nails right now. Now that Zimmer is healthy, Brentz seems to be able to, for the most part, throw strikes. He's still walking a lot of dudes, but it doesn't matter. He's still able to walk. He's still able to work around them. And Barlow has just been great all year. It's good to see Barlow kind of. He was eating a lot of criticism from fans last season, and I thought it was very unwarranted. It was very early in that 60-game season, so everybody was, you know, all those shooting stars were burning bright. So they were ready to tar and feather Scotty Barlow, but he is rebounded. He is nails right now, and I looked it up. I saw the stat last night where they're talking about the scoreless streaks between those 3 guys since May 7th. They've allowed 2 runs between the 3 of them. They have a 2.4 K to walk ratio in 37 and 2/3 of an inning. You got those 3 dudes in high leverage at any given moment. It's never ever going to be Holland, Herrera, Davis type of, you know, you're never going to get that level again. But that's a solid trio in the back of the bullpen. And that isn't including Josh Stalmont, who is, like you said, electric. hitting those triple digits. He's got a hammer curve, and nobody seems to touch it. And we always make the joke, whenever he comes into the game, it is appointment television. It is a gifable moment at any given pitch. Is amazing. So if you got that quartet in that bullpen, I kind of worry about Stamont. He had the knee problem, and then he came back and pitched a couple of times this last week and was still hovering around 94, 95 with that fastball. So there's still plenty of questions about what's going on with his arm, if anything. But if it is truly, they said he was still getting up in the upper 90s in those bullpen sessions. So it seems like he still has it in the tank, but I will like to see that at some point before we get into it. But
yeah, for sure.
You talk about those four. If you can rely on those four, and then you start adding in the Carlos Hernandez, you start adding in the Bolañoses. I'm honestly not going to rely too much on Greg Holland or Wade Davis or Santana if I don't have to. But if you have those four plus any of those other wild cards that might be hot at the moment, it doesn't matter. You can fill up those spots with just Jags at that point.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that's kind of what also is exciting. But my question is do you think? And my only concern with this is, and I get these guys are bullpen arms. A couple of them can be projected as starters. That's kind of what they see Carlos Hernandez wanting to be. Mm-hmm. And I think they even maybe consider Bolaños potentially a starter as well.
Yep.
But do you think that the Royals are going to, I'm trying to make sure I word this correctly. Do you think that they won't burn their windows out to where we don't get to experience them at their full capabilities? Because I'm just trying to think, like, when do you think, in your just honest opinion, when do you think the Royals are competing truly again, where we see consistency potentially for playoffs? And I just want to make sure that we're not like burning through these guys and they're, getting to the point where they're just like, not really that guy anymore.
Yeah. You don't want him to get pigeonholed long enough to lose the starter gene.
Yeah.
I get it. I understand it. And, it's hard to say. I do understand where your concern comes from. I have the same concern as well. But I do think I have faith that, if they do get to that point and they might be becoming borderline, then they maybe start looking into a trade for some of these. I mean, Johnny Bolin is another guy that I think both you and I are in on Johnny Bolin. John Heasley's throwing really well. Alec Marsh is in that conversation as well. They've got a bunch of other guys that are kind of lottery ticket arms that could very well become starters on another club. And really, who's to say? I mean, there's plenty of injuries happen, so they always say the starting pitcher, you never have too many of them type of thing. I think even Dayton Moore said something about wanting to have like 9 or 10 ready to roll at any given time, just because you always need that in a season. So it's tough to say, if I'm worried about them potentially not living up to that potential, because it's an embarrassment of riches at this point almost with what their system's kind of working with. So if we are really looking at a rotation of, Lynch, Lacey, Bubich, Singer, and Keller at that point, or I'm missing Kowar at that point. And then God knows what happens in this draft. They could go, Kumar Rocker could be right there. Jack Leiter could be right there. And at that point, why wouldn't you take them? You have to take them at that point. So that could potentially box out a guy like Bolaños or Carlos Hernandez or Heasley or Bolin or any of these guys that are potentially big league arms. And if they are showing that potential, they're going to show it in AAA too. They're going to bust up their trade value, and we're going to get some solid value back. Maybe one of those impact bats that we need at this point. So I do understand the concern, and I'm right there with you, but I do have faith that, it is a currency of baseball, and they'll be able to turn that around whenever they feel it's advantageous.
I thought you turned into Dayton Moore right there. I do think you said pitching is the currency of baseball.
Let me get back into my Josh persona. I don't want to show my true identity of Dayton Moore. Trust the process, Lucas. Trust the process.
Yeah. Speaking of the draft, I got a video coming out tomorrow where I picked 3 players and I broke it down based on kind of what I've seen a lot of mock drafts picking, the Royals picking. Mm-hmm. As of late, it does seem like it's Jordan Lawler, which is crazy because I've seen him go way up on the boards, but I've also seen him hovering around the Royals. My only thing with that is we have Bobby Witt Jr., who I've heard potentially could go out to center field, but the way the kid's playing, he needs to be at shortstop. Just my opinion.
Sure.
But then I pulled up the list just because I want to make sure I get it right. So then we also have Nick Lofton, who we also recently drafted. But then we also have, where did he go? Daniel Vasquez, which I know he's been doing okay.
Yep.
But he's down in rookie ball. And then they also have, where's he at? The one that we drafted, I think he was from Baylor. Where is he at? Brady McConnell.
McConnell is definitely in the mix for
He's
sure.
from Florida. Yeah, he's from Florida. So
another Florida guy.
Yeah, and so then you got Lucius Fox, who's kind of been floating around, kind of around.
Mm-hmm.
So my only concern is that we have all these shortstops, and they don't all pan out. I get it, they don't all pan out, but I'm on board with like kind of what you're saying. Take the pitcher if they're there. Like there are some stud pitchers that if these guys do start to go up, I mean, you are talking Kumar Rocker. I don't see Lighters slipping that far.
I don't either.
But then
that would be a pipe dream. I didn't think Lacey was going to fall though last year either. So
yeah,
maybe it could. Weird things have happened for sure.
Well, that and then people were freaking out when we got Singer too. So who knows?
Sure.
But I'm just my personal thought is I would love to see us take another pitcher, and I think it would just be incredible. And, I'm also a very big advocate of Henry Davis, the catcher from Louisville.
Yeah, I've heard you drop his name a couple times. I did a little research on him for sure.
Yeah, I'm excited to see. I think he's a good receiving catcher. I think he calls a game very well. It'll be interesting to see how his bat translates from the metal bat over to the wood side. But I mean, you don't expect a catcher to be lights out all the time. I mean, there's catchers that start in the major leagues that hit under 200, but they catch really well. So,
usually you either have like that defensive catcher or you have an offensive catcher. You have a Wilson Contreras or Yadier Molina. His numbers are good this year, but usually he's hovering around 250 and not necessarily a powerhouse at the plate.
For sure. And so basically I'm going to wrap this whole thing up into a thing. So
you're good.
where I'm going with this is like, are you all for taking that shortstop just because it is the best potential there? Or would you rather take another pitcher that in this case is another college pitcher that could be within the organization as early as 2 years, maybe, and maybe at, latest at 5?
The approach that you have to take in an MLB draft is best player available. It just is what it is. You might have a plan where it's something to do with the draft slot money. You want to kind of work it around, see what you can get on the back end of the first round, and maybe you can entice some of these other players with a little bit more money that don't plan on getting drafted. I'm fine kind of finagling that, but in general, you're usually getting the best player available, period. And that's usually priority number one. Having said that, if Kumar Rocker is there, if Jack Leiter is there at number 7, 100% you have to take him. They're probably the best player available in there anyways, so that box is checked. That seems to be plenty of pitching depth in this system. So is there a part of me inside, deep down in the cockles of my soul, that wants them to go draft a bat regardless of who is there? 100% that part of me exists. I kept seeing guys like Khalil Watson was the mock for a long time. Seemed like it was a long time, which I was kind of worried about. He's 5'9", 178, so his size, I'm always kind of worried about those little smaller dudes. But then you kind of brought up an interesting point, is they thought that he might be able to transition to center field, and at that point it got a little bit tastier to me. So if that's the plan, that's fine. It's going to take a little bit of money to get him to sign. But I think that it's doable. Jordan Lawler's in the same boat, 6'2", a lot of comparisons to Bobby Witt Jr. It seems like in that, Texas athletic Texas high school shortstop, turns 19 shortly after the draft. A lot of great toolsy things, 5-tool threat type of guy. So I could totally see the upside in the drafting him as well. It seems to be Dayton Moore's forte to go after a defensive-minded, switch-hitting, light as a feather middle infielder and call it good. We did it, guys. We did it. So it would be a breath of fresh air if Lawler was there. They took him, they invested in him, and maybe he's on a little bit of a faster track with him turning 19. His body's a little bit more developed, and his maturity at the baseball field is a little bit, more intact, kind of like Bobby Witt Jr. And maybe they're both kind of on that track. Another part of the Lawler thing is he is committed to Vandy, and it's going to take a little bit of money to get him to not go to Vanderbilt at that point. But in theory, it'd take him 3 to 4 years to be a contributor at that point. So that's fine. So yeah, I subscribe, and I very much acknowledge and respect the rule that, it needs to be best player available. At the same time, there is that part of me that would love it to be a college bat that is able to contribute in 1, 2, 3 seasons, that is able to line up with that contention window that seems to be opening up a little bit here for us here. So that, and I just need the player to hit. We cannot. We had the contention window in 14 and 15. It was there, and it shut immediately because they could not draft. Period. Everybody they took in those drafts, the talent was there. Every time they drafted someone, the talent was there, and they just missed. So draft the best player available that is going to be that guy. Do it with conviction, and go and make sure he hits. And really, 17, 18, 19, and last year's draft, with Prado's resurgence, Melendez is back in the picture as a prospect. It seems like those draft classes were very good. So it seems like maybe they have turned a corner. Maybe they just did get lucky as prospects kind of wash out, and success rate kind of flutters in and of itself. So I'm just going to need him to hit. That's all. That's all I need.
No, I agree 100%. And it goes back to, I honestly think, and I always compare, and it may not always be the best comparison, but, I think it's much harder to draft in baseball than it is, say, for the NFL, because, and my reasoning behind that is because there's so much that goes into being a baseball player, and the amount of just everything that is required of a baseball player. I mean, you have to go day in, day out. The travel, the strenuous everyday task that is asked. And then you have to be able to perform at a high level all the time for 162 games. I think that's insane. So, I think it's definitely a challenge. And it brings me back to, like you said, the Bubba Starlings, I would even say Luke Hochevar. Even though he helped
to an
win
extent,
us a World Series.
But you then you got you were getting more than just a reliever in that draft. Christian Colon is the bane of my existence.
Yes. And then I agree. And then you had who was the more recent one? I always forget. I want to say Nolan Watson. Was he
Nolan Watson? And there was another one in there.
Is he the one
Russell? Not Addison?
Yes. Yeah. He stepped away from baseball.
Yeah.
Yeah,
and Addison did come back. I believe he was back in their organization last season, or at least I guess it was 2019, with last season kind of being a wash for the minors. But he was back in the organization and pitching as of 2019, I think. But it's just another. Yeah, that's definitely a good example. And both those dudes, prep guys. I don't know how any team, any scout stands up for somebody who's just not like a undeniable, obvious, kick me in the face talent. I don't understand how they can turn 18-year-olds, and for that matter, these international signings that they're pulling off the streets in 14, 15 years old, given $1 million signing bonuses to come play because they have projectable skill. It blows my mind that people are able to read and actually hit on guys on that. It blows my mind.
Yeah, and I think it shows a different hunger. I think it depends on where because we're talking about kids that are in prep schools versus kids who are out on the street playing, taking ground balls with cardboard gloves. I think, that's just me, but I think the hunger is a lot more like I have a lot more to provide than, maybe some, but it is what, that could be either or, but I think
it's a lifestyle for some and a passion, and some people it's a hobby that you're really good at.
Yeah. Well, and all this kind of leads me to a player who I feel is lacking in the passion, who is lacking in, is really, well, there could be multiple on this team that just feel that, but, I just, for the life of me, can't figure out what's going on with Mondi. I get the injuries, and I was listening to the radio the other day, and I thought it was presented extremely, extremely well. He does not understand the difference between being injured and being hurt. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, we kind of hit this, I think it was last week, and we actually boiled over into this week as well. It's hard to say, man. If you're into fantasy sports, you probably play fantasy football as well, and you're
Yes.
well aware of Arian Foster and his soft tissue injury concerns. Great when he's on the field,
Yeah.
absolutely superstar talent when he's on the field, and just cannot stay on it. Those people exist. Period.
Yeah.
It's tough that Mondesi seems to be one of those guys. I am not a big believer in that. A lot of these injuries are a pain tolerance thing. Like an oblique injury, you can't swing a bat at that point. You're not
Yeah.
providing value, period.
Yeah.
A strained hamstring on a dude that is known for potentially stealing 60 bags and playing really good defense, at the very least, he's going to need a hamstring. And if he's not 100%, then he's going to rip it off the bone next time or potentially. And I understand them wanting to be cautious with him. I think that they are wanting to invest in him long term.
Yeah.
I think that they do want to extend him. I think he wants to be extended. I think he wants to stay in the organization. So I can understand why they would decide to baby him a little bit here. I do think that from all the reports, all the big J journos, Alec Lewis, all these guys that talk to these players every day, talk to the coaches, talk to the trainers, talk about there's nobody in that clubhouse that wants to be on that field more than Mondesi does.
Yeah.
And I do believe that. So if you are going to believe in that, and you do believe that this guy is an absolute rare talent, which I do, then I think you have to treat him with kid gloves a little bit.
Yeah.
Even if you do extend him. That's kind of the big thing that we were talking about this last week was extension talk.
Yeah.
And what do they do? How much is that worth? How comfortable are you giving him that type of money? And at that point, are you comfortable with getting only 100 games out of a guy that you're potentially paying $18 million a year for?
Yeah.
And if that's the case, I personally think that I would be willing to sign up for that, at least to buy out the rest of his contract and then maybe get a couple mutual option years on the back end. I would be fine with that.
Yeah.
Just because he's that good of a player when he's on the field. But I
Mhm.
totally understand why people are very hesitant to invest in him, period, let alone give him any reps over potentially Bobby Witt Jr. at that point.
For sure.
So it is quite a question. I'm obviously not out on Mondesi by any means. In fact, I'm kind of okay with seeing where he is on extension talks and seeing if they can come together for buying a little bit of value there.
Yeah.
I think that's an opportunity that they could certainly seize, but it is also a very risky roll of the dice for sure.
Yeah. And, I like playing devil's advocate. And from a fan perspective, because I like to listen to fan perspectives, there are very extreme fan perspectives, but then there's the reasonable ones.
Right.
And it's a very frustrating circumstance because there was so much put into Mondi and what we can see when he is. I mean, that stretch that he put in towards the end of last year was incredible.
Yeah.
But, I can also see where people are like, Bobby Witt is down in the minor leagues. The guy is literally hitting a home run almost every game. He's tearing it up. It's just incredible to see. He's right there, ready to come up. Mondesi's constantly hurt. Let's move on from him and
Yeah.
see what else we can do. I've kind of had a sense, at times I do sense it because I did play college baseball and I can kind of see some aspects. There are times where it does he puts off a vibe like, I don't really want to be in Kansas City. Like I want to go play in a big market. Obviously I've never heard that, but
Right.
I can kind of sense it. And I know that his dad played for the Dodgers. And so I just kind of wonder at times too, does he even want to be in Kansas City? Do you have any kind of thoughts again to kind of assure that?
I mean, just from the reports that he does love it. I mean, those came from his agent and himself.
Yeah.
It does seem like he is very interested in it, and he was close with guys like Ventura at that point. And I feel like Ventura is now a staple and an absolute icon in this organization.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's going to pull at some heartstrings with some of these guys, like Danny Duffy. He's a free agent at the end of the year as well. And I feel like not only did he want to be buried as a Royal years ago, but I think that some of these things that have happened around them in the organization while they've been in this time has, solidified their the blueness of their hearts, if you will. It's man, that was not a great pun. That was not great, all things considered. But I do think that Mondesi does want to be here just from the reports. That's all we can really go off of.
Yeah.
I can understand why someone would get that air of arrogance a little bit. the want for bigger things. It's hard not to have that kind of in the back of your mind when you're a Royals fan, because you know all these guys, anytime they get a superstar talent, you just know they're going to break your heart in 6 years.
Yeah.
Leave you sitting on the doorstep with flowers in your hand, and they're going to run off with a fancy new $30 million a year contract that the Royals can afford. So
Yep.
I think that's kind of ingrained to us. We're kind of expecting it at a certain point.
Yeah.
And I think that might have something to do with those feelings, that you're not alone in that. There's obviously plenty of very rational people that get that same air. I will say, speaking of devil's advocate type of thing, the part where we aren't wanting him to take the bat or take reps away from Bobby Witt Jr., let's move Bobby Witt over to third base.
Yeah.
Is there someone at third base we can't take the bat out of? Is Kelvin Gutierrez really that undeniable at third base? Do we
Don't you be talking
Doziers?
on Kelvin Gutierrez like
I tell you what, man, I wanted him to work out so badly, because again, beating the drum for them to trade Kelvin Herrera a long time,
Yeah.
and they finally do it, and they do it for a guy that is a 45 grade bat at best, and he's really good at defensive. It's got all of the error marks and all the trademarks of Dayton Moore player, and we're kind of seeing that now when he has a ground ball rate of 60% and his exit velocity is like 88, which is around Nicky Lopez level.
Yeah.
It's tough to continue to see that. So I feel like I've always kind of seen this from since we drafted Bobby Witt, that Mondesi's going to be right there at short. I think his defense is undeniable, and it's always going to be magnified and taken full value at shortstop. Just move Bobby Witt over to third. He's kind of built like a third baseman. He's going to profile at the plate as a third baseman, maybe not have as much power, but he's going to have the speed, and that whole left side is going to be locked down
for sure
for a long time, if that's the case, if Mondesi's there. So, and like you mentioned, it's kind of went into the extension talks this week on the podcast, where maybe you start a rotation where it's Bobby Witt, Whit Merrifield, at Mondesi, and Nicky Lopez, and there's just a carousel of the lineup that you just kind of, today's Mondesi's day to DH. Witt, you're at third base. Whit Merrifield, you're at second. Nicky, you're at short, and then you just kind of just rotate them around a little bit every other. And so that's just to keep, again, that's babying Mondesi a little bit and working around him, but. And if you're going to pay someone $20 million a year, you shouldn't have to do that. You should be able to expect him to be in a significant part of your lineup every day. And it's just something we may not get to see as Mondesi kind of shapes up here.
For sure. I think that would be super exciting if he does start to pan out the way we expect, because I think that is honestly the staple that's going to help project this to the next level. I mean, I think Dozier and Soler and those guys that are struggling right now, they'll fizzle out and they'll disappear. I mean, that's just inevitable. And you're going to start to see those guys that, I mean, I've never seen, I've been watching baseball a long time, but what Bobby Witt is doing right now in AA is by far one of the most incredible things I think I've ever seen, because it seems like anytime you go on Twitter and you literally refresh, he hit a home run. That's what's absolutely incredible. I mean, it truly is.
It really is. Yeah.
And if he's not hitting a home run, he's missing home plate and hitting triples. I mean, that's
I was going to say, he's an all-around great profile athlete. He's got about a 30 grade touching home plate rating, I think.
Yeah. So, I mean, that to me, that's what's incredible. And I think that this team really is going to be special. I think, some of these pitching prospects we talk about, it is very unfortunate, because you guys answered my question on the podcast about the pitching, or the player that most people don't know about that is going to be exciting. It was Jonathan Bolin. Then he obviously goes down with Tommy John. That absolutely sucks. But
that might have been the pinnacle of the clearing waivers curse. That might have been, because I think it was the next day, because I played with fire a little bit. I was like, I'm gonna test these powers out. Turns out they were very potent, but that might have been the pinnacle of it for sure.
Well, hopefully he comes back and is throwing flames like he was. But I do think that there is a lot really going for this organization. I really do, and it's exciting. I mean, there's most people don't know about Austin Cox, who is doing really well as well. I mean, you mentioned Alec Marsh, who I'm extremely excited about. I would love to just see him come up and just throw flames too. I mean, you got some guys that throw heat, so there really is a lot of a good potential. Nick Prado, I that's one that I put on when I really was talking about someone who I think, if an injury happens or we get to that point in the season, where you just need to see what the guy has in the major league level. Give him an opportunity, let him go out there and, hit for whatever and just do his thing and experience baseball. And so I hope that we see some of these guys come up for sure.
Yeah, and Prado in particular, like if Solaire's not cutting it, you do want to see what you have in some of these other guys. He could be DFA'd at some point. I could totally see that. I'm not ready to do that by any means, but I could see that happening at some point. And Prado could be knocking on the door. Prado's going to be in the conversation, whether his OPS is in the 600s. His defense is always going to have him in the conversation. I think Dayton Moore coveted Eric Hosmer's defense so much that he needed another guy like Eric Hosmer in that fashion. Nick Prado is continuously compared to Eric Hosmer when it comes to the glove. So, and 2 years ago, he was given the credentials of best glove in the first base of all the prospects in all the land.
Yeah.
So he's always going to be there. It just so happens that right now he's walking 20% of the time. He's got 1176 OPS in AA. So if we're getting gold glove level defense at first base from Nick Prado as well as a bat, that's going to look so good to this lineup for the future. So I'm pumped about Nick Prado and his return. And he just put the work in. He grinded it out, made the changes over that off season, had plenty of work at the outside, worked with Mike Tosar a lot.
Yeah.
So I love the fact that Nick Prado is back on the prospect radar.
For sure. And I'm glad you brought that up because this is something I hit on in one of my videos. How much do you honestly think that the alt site truly helped these guys develop? And my argument for it was to the fact that there was zero pressure. They're not playing necessarily for a paycheck in a way. They're going out there and they're facing their own guys. They're getting the coaching aspect. If they hit a ball and they run to first base, maybe they call time, they go out there and they walk through a scenario. I'm just figuratively saying, and they can't do that in an actual game. So do you think that this alt site really helped a lot of these guys just become, take that next step and understand what the game truly is about?
I've been it's kind of a mixed bag. And I think the Royals in particular had enough talent that these guys were seeing more talented opposition than they would any other random given day. So you've had Bobby Witt Jr. against Daniel Lynch on a regular basis.
Yeah.
Neither one of those guys are going to see each other that often in a regular minor league season. So in that respect, I think it was very beneficial. It's tough because none of the results seem to have come. I mean, Daniel Lynch has gotten blown up. Coar's gotten blown up. Isbell had his cup of coffee at the beginning of the year. Olivares was in the mix, and we'll see what happens with him. But it's just tough. There's no major league production from it. But I do think that just seeing each other every day is both a good mental exercise to kind of see how to plan around somebody that you've seen his stuff recently, what he can do, and you kind of start that chess match between each other, and you just happen to have the same opponent every day. If you have that too much, you're not going to grow as much as you probably would. It's also, you're not getting that everyday grind nearly as much. You're not on the bus, you're not in the hotel, you're not doing all this stuff that you would potentially do on the grind in a major league or a minor league system this season. So I think there were certainly pros and cons to it. It's tough to really weigh how much it helped or how much it hurt because the results are just not there yet. So it's tough to say. I feel like there's pros and cons on both sides, and it's kind of a mixed bag. So we'll have to see what happens in the long run with their development to see exactly what's going on with them in the long term.
For sure. Yeah, man. And I think it's tremendous. I mean, it sucks that we had to go through a pandemic, no fans. Just the way the season really went about it, just you get that itch when baseball is in the air. And when we had a pandemic where you couldn't go to the games, it was a shortened season, and then it's like I feel like I missed out a lot. That's where it really started bothering me, just like to get to this year. So I think this year is that much more meaningful. But I think it definitely
from a system standpoint, what I wouldn't have given to get some kind of feed or just like a standing room only type of access to that alt-side action, I would have eaten that up.
I actually, so kind of, I'll go off real quick. So I actually, in college, my senior year, I went to the University of St. Mary in Leavenworth. I played baseball there, and I was actually a groundskeeper for the T-Bones.
Yeah.
And I actually live right now. Currently, I live away like literally 2 minutes from the stadium.
Nice.
So it's nice to be able to be around it and know that I was driving past there quite a bit, and being like, "Hey, Bobby Witt's over there,"
Yeah. Just
or
right over there.
Lynch is over there, and I'm like, "What's going on?" I know the ins and outs of that stadium, but yeah, it was pretty cool to know that those guys were right down the street and just grinding it out, getting after it every day. It was pretty cool. And
Popping in a Nebraska Furniture Mart every now and then to be like, maybe old Bobby's in here somewhere. Maybe he's decking out this apartment or something.
Yeah, that'd be awesome. Or see Patrick Mahomes sitting on the couch talking about his deal. So
I'm sure it's decked out new home, but certainly very furnished by Nebraska Furniture Mart. Shout out
for sure. So another story too. I had to go and get a new shirt because I wanted to make sure I looked good for you.
I appreciate that. You look great. By the way.
I appreciate that. And today
I should have sold. It's kind of a weekend now because you kind of had to ask me for it. But yeah, you do look very good tonight.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I've been waiting the whole time for you to say that. But in the process of going and getting my shirt today, we're driving up the street and out of the vehicle comes Jackson Mahomes.
Yeah.
And I'm like, that's Jackson. Almost hit him. I don't know what I would have done. I probably would have been literally the number one target in all of Kansas City. So I almost veered off, got into a wreck because the guy just opened his door, climbed out of his car. But yeah.
Climbed out is right. He's like 6'8", 6'9", something like that.
He's a big dude.
Yeah.
So
I went to Mizzou for a season, back in the Quinn Snyder era, and it was not the good Quinn Snyder era. And he was crossing the street, headed to the Mizzou arena, and I almost hit him just because, like, oh, is that Quinn Snyder? It is. I need a break. I should not hit Quinn Snyder. Yeah, I totally understand. Not a great time to be starstruck when you're behind the wheel.
Yeah, no, most definitely not. I probably would have hit Quinn Snyder because I'm a KU fan, if you can't tell right here. So yeah,
it would have him as a KU fan. The more Quinn Snyder coached Mizzou at that point, the better it was for KU fans.
Yeah, it started getting the other day I just had to, because I was feeling it. I had to post when Thomas Robinson sent that ball.
Don't do this to me.
Yeah,
don't do this to me. I don't need to hear this. This is I shun that. That was like my birthday that game happened.
Okay.
I don't need that in my life.
All right, I'll cut that off. But,
yeah.
Did you see though? They I don't know if you did see though. They didn't announce that KU and Mizzou will be playing. They pulled it out when they're actually putting it on the schedule and everything. I thought that was pretty exciting. So
that is good. 5 years, 5 seasons, I think is what it was.
I hope so.
It was such a dumb thing why it wasn't happening. It should be a given. And they did that fundraiser that one time, sold exhibition tickets, sold out immediately, raised $1 million, I think, for it.
It was incredible.
It's a no-brainer to keep that rivalry alive. So it's something I'm glad to see coming back for sure. Even if we don't get to see it.
I would take the beating in football every year just to be a part of it. I mean,
that's fine.
It'd be fun.
That would give us Mizzou fans a little bit more respectability among ourselves, because it's going to be a little bit before the basketball teams are going to be able to. It's going to take a death penalty to happen, which is not out of the question at this point.
Oh, I like it.
The FBI they're going to do what they need to do, but we'll see what happens with that KU basketball program. See where we are in about 5 years.
Yeah,
it's going to take them that long.
We'll see. I'm sure some envelopes are being slipped under some doors.
Oh yeah. If they were comfortable enough to give Bill Self a lifetime contract, then I'm sure they'll be fine. They'll be fine.
Oh yeah, most definitely. So, well, man, my final question is baseball related, and this one it's a lot of fun. I think you might think about it, maybe you won't. But to me, it took a little bit to think about it and why. So I said, if you could plug any of the big league superstars, Mike Trout, Bryce Harper, Aaron Judge, Fernando Tatis Jr., Ronald Acuna, or Shohei Ohtani into the Royals organization, who would it be and why?
Oh, yeah, that's certainly tough. I mean, immediately Mike Trout comes to mind because Michael A. Taylor is not Mike Trout. Spoiler alert, it takes an expert in Royals like myself to realize that Mike Trout is not is able to bring more to the table than Michael A. Taylor. So my head immediately goes to that. Mike Trout is the best baseball player in the game, period. I'm not hearing anything else, but I do understand that, there's merit in guys like Acuna. The youth and the extension that he just signed is awfully tempting. I love me some Ronnie Acuna. Robert, I always do that. Lewis Roberts.
Yes.
He just signed that extension as well. I think he would be very fun to roam Kauffman Stadium center field for a long time. It's also tough to turn down the likes of old DeGrom. To have that anchor, that stopper in the rotation is going to be very valuable, and it's certainly very tempting. He is 31, I think, is how it is. So it would be maybe 3 or 4 years worth of a contract, and so maybe there's a little bit more of a better answer. But I'm going to stick with Trout at this point, just because it has to be Trout. Any of these hypothetical situations has to be Trout, no matter who your center fielder is at the moment. Your team is always going to be better with Mike Trout. So I'm going that way. We'll see how this all turns out.
Yeah. And I really had to evaluate. I think Trout is on there. Harper's one of my favorite baseball players of all time, if not my favorite.
Sure.
Aaron Judge just doesn't do it for me. He really doesn't. I mean, you're talking about an injury prone person. And just, he has his moments, but I easily skipped over Judge. Tatis now, I think, is exciting, is super, brings the stuff that I would hope one day we can see from Mondesi.
Yeah.
But Acuna did it for me. And I think it's because just the way he plays the game, his ability, he's very young, and just that for sure. There's part of me that led to Ohtani just because it's just incredible. And I would just want him just to be able to go out there and hit. I mean, his ability to just put the stick on the ball is just one of the most incredible things. That
seems so effortless too.
Yeah, and that home run that he hit the other day, just up in the zone, it was just, like you said, effortless. It was just most incredible. So it took me a while. I think if I had to, I'd probably go Trout too, but Acuna for sure, I think, is right there.
Yeah.
But yeah, so let me.
If we're dropping a superstar in there, I got to have some swagger with it. So maybe that's where Trout is a little bit lacking. He needs a little bit of a swagger to be in my book. So maybe the answer is Acuna, because he got that drip, man.
Oh yeah, he comes in the dugout and they're doing all kinds of dances, and they get hyped over there in Atlanta.
If you get a swagger that's infectious and not just comes off like an a-hole, that's the sweet spot. I love it.
So that leads me to one more, and I promise this will be the last one.
Give me all the last questions, just rapid fire.
Do you think Trout finishes his career in Los Angeles?
I do, just because it's impossible to trade that contract, right? If he's at a point where you're even thinking about it, then he's already past the point where anybody else is going to want to pick up the tab on that. It's not like they're trading Josh Hamilton or DFAing Albert Pujols' 55-year-old ass. It is Mike Trout. It is the Trout man.
Yeah.
And, if he's not producing, if he's 58 years old and not hitting 30 dingers and above 300 and OPSing above 1100 or whatever it is, if he's not doing that, then he's already way too expensive for anybody to be interested in. So
yeah, I think it's just unfortunate. I don't think he ever wins a series. I just don't. I don't think that they know how to go out and get pitching.
It's wild. It's incredible how bad they are for what they had. Rendon was a great player when they signed him. Ohtani, exceptional, generational talent, and they cannot do anything with that trio. It's wild.
Well, I mean, Jared Walsh is having an epic year. I mean, that
Brandon
guy's
Marsh
out there, crushing the ball. I can't figure it out. I mean, I guess they just try to plug in guys too much in areas like, is Jay Up washed up? They got Iglesias from the Tigers, and he's a great glove. He's an Alcides Escobar, but they try to plug in these guys too much, and I think they really try to makeshift the starting rotation without really solidifying that bullpen. And I think that's always been a problem. Like they just have never had those pitchers that are just blow you off the wall and type pitching. So I don't know. I just don't ever see him winning a World Series. And I think that's unfortunate. So
that is very unfortunate. That is way more ridiculous than like Dan Marino never winning a Super Bowl. I mean, Dan Marino was and never will be in the conversation of best player ever. Trout is already in that conversation. His career is not even done. He's also probably not going to win a title.
Yeah.
It's going to be a damn shame.
Yeah, it really is. And man, it's crazy. I went back and looked the other day because I'm like, I know the pace he's on for home runs. And I always like to go back and look and see if these guys are going to potentially get into the top 10 of home runs. And
Right.
just to even, I got to catch the very back end of Griffey when King Griffey Jr. when he was, going through his stuff. And just to think about if that guy was healthy and just to see what he could have done, it would have been, and I love going back and watching his highlights because, like I said, I got to see towards the end. I caught a little bit of the Reds, when he played for the White Sox. So he wasn't definitely elite at those levels, but
right.
Yeah, man, Griffey was
it's tough.
Special
It's
dude.
tough to see those dudes. I love me some King Griffey Jr. His swing is still undefeated in my head, only maybe rivaled by a smooth, no doubt Alex Gordon home run.
Yeah.
When you got that sweet follow through, those are the top two in my book as far as follow through and smooth swings. It was tough to see Ken Griffey Jr. hit the wall, and boy did he hit it.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, Mike Trout is like 75th in all-time WAR. He could very well pass. He'd be up to 50s by the end of this year, maybe, depending on when he comes back and how he comes back. He's got a long way to go to get into the Babe Ruth WAR total conversation, but at this point, I'm not putting it past him. He's got the skills to do it.
Yeah, I'd love to see that. I think if he can, the thing is he's got to find a way to stay healthy. I think that's kind of been handicapping him a little bit. So.
Sure, it's gonna get more and more gonna get more and more frequent at this point. So
oh yeah, I mean, I can tell you, going out on the slow pitch softball field at 32, going on 33, if I take a mean hack, I'm out with an oblique for like weeks.
Weeks, yeah. You might as well hang it up for the year because that's gonna nag at you. It was about the same time we were coming to the end of our corporate league business softball league, and legged out a triple. Believe it or not, this body legged out a triple one time, and it was post 30s. No big deal. Not trying to brag on this podcast, but it did happen. And then I took a weird step in the dugout, and I felt my knee ACL sprain. So I was like, all right, maybe we'll just be done with this. I'll end it. I ended my softball slow pitch saw or fast pitch time on that note. So it was time to call it. So
yep, I completely understand, man. I completely get it. So, well, Josh, man, I really do. This was absolutely incredible, and I really do hope the viewers appreciate what they were able to get from you, man. It really is. I love it. I love just listening to you guys talk and really just providing your guys's insight on stuff. It's incredible because baseball is by far one of my favorite sports, and I know there's a lot of people out there that like this stuff too. So thank you for coming on.
Lucas, thanks for having me, man. I appreciate what you're doing as well. You're also putting out some great stuff, so I appreciate you and what you're doing. But I do appreciate you having me on. It was a blast, and I'd love to come on anytime you need me to.
Awesome, that'd be incredible, guys. Swing on over. Seriously, go check out Clearing Waivers podcast. You are obviously a contributor at Royals Review, so swing on over there, check out the articles, and see what's going on. Josh Keiser, thank you.
Thanks, Lucas.
Have a good one, guys.